Hello again everyone and welcome back to the Underground. This is the Intel update for December 15th through the 21st, 2024. So let's get right to it. Starting with the Northeast region, as one might expect, we are still sort of working our way through the drone crisis or saga in New Jersey and the tri-state area, with some developments taking place over the past week. So with regards to the alleged drone sightings themselves, there really has not been a whole lot of new information. We still really don't have hardly any good photographs of whatever these objects are. Even though we're going on 3 weeks now, for some reason, the tens of millions of people that live in this area and the thousands of professional photographers still have not gotten really any good image of any of these alleged drones. So, you know, that's kind of a data point that we really can't ignore. A lot of people have claimed to have gotten good, clean, and clear photographs of you know, some sort of object in the sky, but you can't really do anything with it. So a lot of people, thousands of people have messaged me saying, hey, here's a clear photo, you idiot. And then they send me a photograph and it's like a dot in the sky, or like a light in the sky. You can't even tell if it's a star or not. So, you know, that's the kind of thing that I've kind of been working through the past week. And again, we've really just reached kind of information saturation, right? It's really hard to discern what is real from what is fake or what is misidentification. Again, despite, you know, me talking at great length about this last week, very few people have come forward with any sort of good criteria to work from, as in a SALT report, you know, size, activity, location, time. Very few people have come out with good, clean evidence of any kind. Now, a lot of people have messaged me with very heartfelt and genuine sightings of some kind of drone in the sky. And, you know, a lot of people have emailed me or messaged me with very, very good reports. You know, unfortunately, most people, basically no one, has been able to get a good photograph of what they have seen. So that's, again, a data point that we just really can't ignore. But a lot of people have emailed me saying that, you know, they have seen something. Unfortunately, we have to remember that there is a difference between observation and identification, and there's a difference between identification and recognition. So, you know, we have to realize that if we see something in the sky, we can't really say anything more than we saw something in the sky, right? We have to have additional context. Where was this at? Where was it headed? Did you see any weapons on board? Did it look like any other type of aircraft that maybe we can glean some sort of capabilities from? Do you see how more information is going to help us get out of this realm of, well, something's happening, but we don't know what. But for now, that's kind of where we're at. We know something's going on, and we know that there are at least some consumer-grade drones, or even maybe militarized drones, flying around in this area. But beyond that, we can't say very much, right? We just do not have that much information. So let's not talk about the drones themselves very much, but let's talk about the governmental response to it. Like I wrote in the wire yesterday, several TFRs, or temporary flight restrictions, otherwise known as no-fly zones, have been in place throughout New Jersey, Long Island, and really just the whole kind of tri-state area. More and more are popping up by the minute, so by the time this briefing comes out, I'm sure there will be a few dozen more, but there hasn't really been that much explanation behind the reasoning or rationale for in placing these TFRs throughout the region. However, I suspect personally that the governor's office probably said, well, we were seeing a lot of drones and we have to do something, but we don't really know what to do, so we're going to do the only thing that we know how to do, which is put a ban around something. So my guess is that they said, well, we're very much at risk for electrical substation attacks with drones because the FBI has told us, probably in a lot of closed-door meetings, that this is a major threat because the FBI is kind of involved in those plans themselves. So they understand that the larger concerns of drone attacks on electrical substations are a huge threat. It's a huge risk right now. And it has been for many, many years. It's not a new threat. It's been around for a long time. So my guess is someone in the governor's office probably saw this report or saw a series of things that made them think, well, this is something that we can do. We can put up a no-fly zone around electrical substations and call it a day. That's my personal speculation on what these TFRs are meant to do. Unfortunately, you can very clearly see, anyone who has spent a very short period of time in the world of counterterrorism can see that this is probably a very, very bad idea. Mostly because, well, like I wrote in The Wire, it seems as if no one has asked the question, hey, wait a minute, why don't we already have no-fly zones around critical infrastructure? Why do we not already have this in place throughout the country? Well, historically, going back dozens of years, the general sentiment is no-fly zones don't really work, especially for low-level quadcopters. They don't really, the amount of capability you would get by doing such isn't really worth the squeeze. So, for the most part, putting a small no-fly zone around something that's very, very important identifies that point as being a very, very important place. That's why we haven't had TFRs around critical infrastructure for the past few decades, because everyone knew that it would be better for a very important and critical, like, electrical switching station or a substation or something to just be there and nonchalantly just, we can't hide it. You can't hide anything, right? So trying to hide it will draw more attention to it. That is one of the big aspects of the counterterrorism world, is that there are always malign actors watching, right? There are always bad guys trying to find out how to cause mayhem. And TFRs being around very, very important sites is a huge red flag, a huge neon sign saying, this is an important site. So that's why this hasn't been done in the past. And it would seem whoever's calling the shots in New York and New Jersey hasn't been told this long-standing doctrine, or they are making a very flawed judgment call. It could be that, like I wrote, the good idea fairy showed up. Some senior leader or military official or counterterrorism official said, "Hey, well, we can't really do anything more than put a TFR around some important sites to make sure that we don't have drones flying over them." And no one asked a follow-up question of, well, will a TFR actually stop drones from flying over these locations? Because right now the answer is no. You have to remember the large counterterrorism intelligentsia, so to speak, is still operating under a 2014, 2015 mentality of drones, right? Like your DJI Phantom 1s or Phantom 2s, right? They're still operating under the assumption that a TFR or a no-fly zone will prevent a drone from taking off. Much like what we have in Washington, D.C., right? You can take any DJI drone and plop it on the National Mall, and guess what? It's not going to take off because it's a no-fly zone, and it's programmed into that drone. It's a very long story, but it's programmed into the drone to not, take off in these regions, right? So that's how this works for a lot of the consumer-grade drones. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian war happened, and now the biggest threat is not coming from a DJI drone of somebody who wants to get a closer picture of the White House. That's not the threat anymore. That's the threat for, like, low grade, people who are just like doing pranks or something like that. Right now, people can make their own drones, and they can make their own platforms without all of this proprietary software that obeys the TFRs. So what does this mean at the end of the day? Well, it means a few things. For one, it identifies all of the critical sites for people who want to cause problems. So that's a huge concern. Now, again, a malign actor, a terrorist or somebody like that who is trying to cause mayhem, this is not going to help them that much. A professional or slightly more organized insurgent group or group of malign actors, they're not going to be helped by these sites being identified via these TFRs. That's not going to help them much, because you can just go on Google Maps and find any electrical substation, right? And there's your target. The thing is, though, is that what is this going to do? This is going to identify all of these sites for all of the idiots out there who otherwise would not have been a national security threat. So now, instead of having 2 or 3, jihadi terrorists to kind of worry about, now you've got 2 or 3 jihadi terrorists to worry about, and thousands of low-grade idiots who otherwise wouldn't even be able to think, oh, well, this might be a critical site. So congratulations, you have now just identified all of this, and now you have increased the number of people, the federal government has increased the number of people who are now in the threat vector box sort of thing. So instead of tracking 2 or 3 bad guys per district, now you're talking about thousands. So that's what this has done. This is why this is a concern. I am sure someone at the top of the totem pole said, it's a negligible concern, put a no-fly zone around these electrical substations so that we can rule out innocent behavior. I don't know about anybody else, but there's not that many people, there are not that many innocent actors flying drones around electrical substations. Like, it's, first of all, illegal anyway. You can't fly near power lines anyway, so there's a certain distance there anyway, so they're already breaking the rules if they're hovering over an electrical substation. But also, the fact that, well, how many innocent people are really doing that? You know, electrical substations are the least photogenic things there are. So my guess is, even without the TFRs, if somebody is hovering a quadcopter over an electrical substation, that's a huge red flag. That's a huge hostile act, right? So again, all this has done has been a knee-jerk reaction that is not actually resulting in anything good occurring. It's just identifying the sites for bad guys, but it's also not actually helping things at all. And why is this? Well, again, it seems like the counterterrorism agencies have forgotten this concept of defense in depth, meaning a layered defense. You don't ever want to make something illegal unless you can back that up, because once a person realizes that they can break a rule and nothing bad happens to them, all of the other rules that you have out there are diminished, right? So if you have a TFR around an electrical substation and an insurgent group attacks that same substation, what do you think is going to happen to all the other TFRs? It's going to prove that nothing can stop this sort of behavior. If you make something illegal and then you can't follow up on stopping that behavior, that's a huge problem. Now, TFRs by themselves, having no fly zones around critical sites, there's a critical reason for that, because it is one of the very first parts of the chain in, say, an engagement, right? If you're going to shoot something down at some point, you know, or bring it down with some kind of electronic countermeasure, the very first thing you're going to want to do is make sure, without a shadow of a doubt, that that person or whatever that object is, that drone, is in the wrong. Okay, so if someone flies into a no-fly zone and they continue flying into a no-fly zone, that means that they have either modified their equipment to do so, or they're operating in some sort of intent, right? So we're showing a deliberate action to go against the regulations. So again, it is a tool in the toolbox, but like I said, you can't just put a rule in place and then have no way to back it up. So, you know, this is not something that's going to work out in the favor of the American people with regards to counterterrorism, I'm afraid. So yeah, not super great. I wish I had better news for everyone, but it seems like this is not a very wise move, and this is not necessarily me speaking, just my own opinion. This for those who maybe have not spent a career in the counterterrorism world, doing something like this in the way that they have done it, very specifically, is not in line with most counterterrorism doctrine. So we're not following the rule book here. We're not going by the doctrine that's been established, and we're not going by anything that makes any common sense in the world of counterterrorism. I think that it would be very hard pressed to find anyone who would say this is a good idea in the way that they have done it. Because what you want to do, what the manuals say, is put a TFR around something, but also have things like ground observers, intelligence collection networks, drone countermeasures. You need all of these things to work in harmony, right? Again, defense in depth. You can't just ban something and then have no way to back it up. Because when you do that, you've just identified all of these critical sites and you've gotten nothing in return. Now, again, if you're thinking a little bit more sneakily, you might say, well, why don't they put some TFRs around things that aren't important to kind of muddy the water? Well, that would be a great idea. But if you look up all of these TFRs on the handy-dandy map that the FAA provides, it doesn't appear to be so. I mean, they haven't put up a TFR, you know, like a grand shell game, right? They haven't put up any TFRs or anything that's not important. So again, I hesitate to even talk about this kind of thing because it's such a ridiculously bad idea, but again, the feds have done it themselves. So, I mean, me talking about it is not really going to cause any more consternation, I guess, than what the feds have already done. I mean, this is now in the international space. Anybody with an internet connection can look this stuff up. So So, it's not that great of a situation, but I guess we'll have to see how it works out. Hopefully, things will work out, but it just doesn't seem to be a very, very good idea, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see how things work out. Speaking of drone incursions, I briefly wanted to mention that the Northeast region is not the only place where drones have been observed. Again, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base has had several drone incursions at their airfield, which resulted in a NOTAM being issued to close the airfield or close the airspace for a period of time last week. Again, once that briefing went out, they've had several more instances of drones being detected, so they've witnessed that sort of thing. Now again, this is kind of how we have to separate things from what's going on in New Jersey from what's going on around the rest of the country. Like I pointed out last week, drone incursions at military bases have been escalating quite sharply over the past couple of years as drones have become more commonly observed throughout the United States. So again, we've had things like Vandenberg Space Force Base report incursions of literally Chinese nationals collecting intelligence on the base using a drone, recovering the drone, and then trying to get on a plane and go back to China. So we've had that sort of thing. We're seeing similar things in Ohio of unknown origin, at least unknown in the public space. So again, this is kind of a big deal with regards to drone incursions at military bases. That is very much certain. That is absolutely happening. Is this related to what's going on in New Jersey? It's hard to say. Again, because we're dealing in the open source world, we don't really have access to a lot of the reports of these drone incursions at other military bases. So I think for the most part, what has happened in New Jersey is a case of genuine drones being spotted, resulting in a case, large, thousands of cases of misidentification, which has kind of spiraled the situation out of control. And now a lot of malign actors are taking advantage of the fray. So for the Chinese spies in Ohio or Columbus or Cincinnati or wherever, they say, hey, look, the people are freaking out in New Jersey. Let's go take advantage of this chaos to go fly over the military base again. So, that would be a solid move from a Chinese spy. Here in the United States, it seems like that would be fairly common for them to do. So, again, it's one of those things where wishing will make it so. Again, like I said last week, you can definitely create a national security concern just based on a case of mistaken identity. Moving outside of the United States, I'll come back to the drones in just a moment, but I wanted to briefly touch on the terror attack that occurred in Germany last night, in addition to some of the events going on in Germany. So Germany is going through kind of a transition time because a couple of weeks ago their government collapsed. They had a vote of no confidence, and Chancellor Scholz's government has basically collapsed on him. So they're going to be having a snap election in February, and we'll see who comes out on top. Right now, the AfD political party is kind of surging, and that is kind of played into what happened last night at Magdeburg, the terror attack that occurred at a Christmas market there. So again, details are hard to come by right now for a couple of different reasons. For one, the event just occurred, so not a whole lot of information. It's still kind of a developing story. And this most sharply affects the casualty count. So right now, officially, 2 people were killed instantly during the attack. Possibly 5 fatalities have occurred so far, but considering that there are over 80 wounded, unfortunately, the authorities have very bluntly stated that many dozens more may be expectant. So that's why they haven't been able to release a casualty count just yet, because there are so many people that are wounded that are not expected to survive this attack. So again, casualty count will be revised at a later time. Once more, coming back to the more political concerns, I guess, throughout the region, one of the major details of the attack is related to the attacker. A lot of information is very contradictory. What seems to be quite certain is that the attacker is of Saudi origin. He is a Saudi refugee who was granted asylum in Germany due to his alleged persecution in Saudi Arabia for his views, I suppose. It's hard to say. Again, one of the very first instinctive things to kind of lean on is that this was an Islamic-based attack, more of a jihad-type event. Hard to say with this one. It's not immediately clear. I personally believe that it is. However, there's a lot of contradictory information out there about how the attacker like renounced Islam or something to that degree. It's very hard to say. This is a very unique individual. He's an older man, for one. You usually don't see this type of thing, and he's also a local doctor. So he's a medical professional, so that kind of highlights that it probably didn't have anything to do with current events in the Middle East, as you would maybe expect, considering that he could have, killed many patients over the past few years that he's been living in Germany and practicing. So again, it's one of those strange cases. I hope to have more information on it by Monday, but largely, I guess the key takeaway for now, and bringing these back to the United States as well, is that this man had been reported several times over the past few years because of his very violent rhetoric on social media. So he openly threatened to kill many people, and the authorities did absolutely nothing about it because he was a refugee, and well, we know how that goes. So bringing things back to the United States in the context of the drones crisis going on in the Northeast and the potential badness that could come from that due to the, in my opinion, the incompetent approach to counterterrorism that has been undertaken throughout the Northeast region. In the context of what's going on in Germany, I just briefly wanted to kind of touch on, what can we do with regards to these things. So specifically for the Northeast region, guys, one of the most important things that you can do is just be aware, okay? Be ready to observe things. I think a lot of the problems that we're seeing in New Jersey and a lot of the unfortunately the misidentification of things is simply people looking up from their smartphones for the first time ever or in many, many years. So again, when you've got governors of states, taking pictures of the constellation Orion in the sky and they think it's drones, that's a pretty big problem, I think, and it's more of a societal issue than a case of anything else. I mean, maybe a case of mass hysteria, I don't know, but just being aware of what the night sky looks like at night, this is very, very important to do. It's very important to understand what aircraft look like at night. It's very important to understand what drones actually look like. And just being aware of things. Again, like I mentioned last week, do you understand that you can track aircraft online? Do you understand how ADS-B aircraft tracking works? Do you understand the limitations of it? All of these things I covered last week seem to be very, very important skills that not a lot of people have kind of prioritized. So, it's okay, but before we start reacting to things and punching this into our risk assessment, we need to understand that we have a lot of learning to do sometimes. So, again, leading into risk assessment and risk mitigation, one of the more important things that's kind of obvious, but a lot of people seem to forget, is that panicking does no good. If you find yourself out in your yard in the middle of the night, holding your smartphone to the sky and just freaking out, you really might want to examine if that's actually helping anything. Generally speaking, knee-jerk reactions to some large-scale events are not really that good of an idea either way. Just like in New York, the knee-jerk reaction of, well, let's put TFRs around things that are important. Is that going to help anything? Is that really going to do anything? And is it going to have any sort of public calming effect? Sometimes, a lot of times in government has to do things, or government agencies have to do things that are probably not the best idea to do, simply to calm the fears of the public, right? A lot of government inefficiency occurs from the citizenry not understanding that to do a certain thing would do no good. Now, is that the case in New Jersey and New York, where they've put up these TFRs around substations? I don't think so. I think that was just a knee-jerk reaction, the bare minimum that they think they can get away with doing, and that's pretty much that. But you also have to remember, asking your government to do something for you that is not going to help anything in the end, that factors into your risk assessment for sure. Really, at the end of the day, risk assessment and being able to understand what the threats are and take measures to mitigate those threats, that's probably the best way to look at things. If you've got a drone hovering over your house, or if you see something strange at night, or if something's happening, or, God forbid, an attack occurs via a drone on, say, an electrical substation, as New York seems to think is going to happen, what are you going to do about it, right? Having the ability to have a prepared plan for that sort of thing is a huge morale boost. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, and it's very, commonly understood that if, say, a drone attack were to occur, say a small quadcopter was flown by some insurgent into a target in the New York or New Jersey area, it will probably have a very minimal effect in terms of, battlefield effects. It's a very small device usually, but it can take out the power for a pretty good chunk of the United States. And even something as small as a very tiny quadcopter can cause a lot of panic. So having the ability to plan for these sorts of things beforehand really helps you avoid panicking when the chips are down, right? So like I said here, being prepared even the tiniest little bit has definitely proven to be a huge morale boost during a crisis. It helps you build your confidence. It helps other people who may be a little bit more fearful of things to be a lot more prepared. Again, it may be a little bit scary to kind of start thinking about preparedness before the event. It's sort of like, mortuary planning, right? Planning for things like life insurance and burial and things like that. That's kind of a morbid subject to talk about sometimes, but once you get through the initial unpleasantness of talking about that sort of thing, same thing with regards to preparing for major events like this. Once you get past that initial stage of unpleasantness, you find that at the end of the day, you feel a lot better, and the people around you feel a lot better as well for having some sort of plan. Sort of like I mentioned earlier, having the ability to understand the threat environment and understand whether or not a capability is matched to the right, area is very, very important as well. So what I mean by that is that sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes attacks are very, very predictable. A lot of times you can look at an area, you can be in a place, particularly around the holiday season, right? So you've got all of these indicators lining up. You can look around. I don't know how many other people do this, but I would imagine that if you're watching this briefing at this point, you're probably a little bit more observant than the average bear. But, basically raise your hand if you've been in a situation where you're in a public space and you look around and say, wow, this is a very, very high risk environment because this is a very, very juicy target, right? Sometimes you can predict these sorts of things just by looking around. Other times you can't really, but a lot of times you can, such as in Magdeburg. Anyone who has seen the horrific video of that attack can look at that and say, good grief, you could have seen that this was a potential from, a mile away, right? So again, this is something to consider. One thing that statistics have indicated is that time and time again, reading everything from the studies of insurgent attacks in the Middle East to the manifestos of some crazy nut job who decides to go conduct a terror attack here in the United States, if you read what they wrote about the attack, or if you read about the details of the attack, say if they survived or something like that, and authorities are able to interview them, one thing that remains constant is that terrorists in general, they always choose the softer target. If they have a target and they are trying to attack it, and they get there on the day of the attack and they see that it is there are people there, there is a counterterrorism effect there is security at the target, there are fences up or something like that they didn't plan for, a lot of times they'll avoid that location. We've seen this happen a lot with mass shooters, where they report that they show up to their primary target and there's security there, so they decide to go somewhere else. Again, deterrence works, especially with regards to terroristic attacks. But here's the kicker with all of this. The deterrence, the counterterrorism efforts must be matched to the threat. This is something that apparently Europe has had a very hard time with understanding. For instance, in Germany, there are very, very few insurgents in Germany that have firearms, okay? So the mass shooting threat is very much reduced in favor of what the primary attack vector seems to be in Germany, which is vehicle ramming. If you were to ask me what is the number one terroristic threat in the entirety of Europe, I would absolutely say vehicle ramming attacks. Insurgents know this. This is why these types of attacks keep coming about. Again, mass stabbing attacks are very, very common as well, but in terms of the numbers of victims that can be achieved by a terrorist, vehicle ramming is definitely the preferred method, especially in some place like Germany, where you have to understand the local culture of the Christmas market, right? These are, for people in America that may not understand, in Germany, most towns, most cities have, in Germany, they love Christmas. It's a whole monthly celebration. It's a very big thing, and it's very amazing to take part in. If you've ever been to Germany during Christmas time, it's very, very amazing to see. Unfortunately, there's a lot of risks, right? So they have a very, very big threat for vehicles ramming these Christmas markets, these very big events and markets that are set up with a lot of pedestrians. It's a very, very big risk, right? So Germany has done things like put up counterterrorism vehicle barricades everywhere, things like that. But unfortunately, you also have to remember that you must match the counterterrorism sort of mitigation to the threat itself. For instance, the insurgents know that armed soldiers walking around, checking the purses of old ladies for Swiss Army knives, right? They know that that's not going to stop a vehicle. A vehicle is a several-ton, hard metallic object that no amount of small arms in the world is going to stop. So they know that even if they get shot and they die behind the wheel while conducting their attack, they know that physics alone, the inertia, is going to carry that attack out, which is why this is such a huge, huge risk. So if you have a situation where you're, say, in a public place, right, and you notice that there's an awful lot of armed cops around, but there are no vehicle barriers, do you see where we're mismatching the threat? You want to make sure that the threat is matched to the mitigation. So if you show up to a place like a Christmas market or something and you look around and there's a lot of armed police, okay, cool, that's fantastic, good, we've got a good, counterterrorism effect there, but that's not the biggest risk. The biggest risk at this particular venue is vehicle ramming, and there's no mitigation for that. How effective is your counterterrorism effort, right? So again, this is a little bit hard to explain, I suppose, but really what you can do as the average citizen out there is whenever you're at an event, a public place or something like that, you can think two different things. You can ask yourself two different questions. One is, how would a terrorist attack this place? If you're standing someplace, be it a Christmas market, farmer's market, some public venue, going to a concert someplace, whatever, you can ask yourself just in your head, how would a terrorist attack this place? And two, are the counterterrorism efforts aligned with this threat, or are they misaligned? If you think, okay, how would a terrorist attack this place? Well, vehicle ramming, that's how they would attack this place. And the second question is, well, are there mitigations for that attack, right? It's a very simple idea, but unfortunately, a lot of times these things kind of get misaligned, and we find ourselves living and working within a very high-risk environment, right? So again, coming back to the sort of drone idea in New Jersey, New York area, right? Let's talk about what we've learned so far. So again, when it comes to the drones and the potential drone threats that have now kind of materialized, whether or not they were there in the first place, who knows? But this is now most certainly a concern, or at least the federal government thinks so. Otherwise, they wouldn't put TFRs around things. So when it comes to what the drone threats are you able to observe? Are you able to observe the drone or the object in the sky, and can you sort of rule out it being a commercial aircraft based on flight tracking apps? And can you understand that, a lot of times aircraft don't even show up on flight tracking applications? Are you able to understand the risks when it comes to drones being in your area? So if you live in an area and you live next to, or you have an apartment building next to an electrical substation, does that mean that your risk is increased? Well, yeah, it probably does. So what can you do to mitigate that? Can you be a little bit more prepared for that sort of thing if something were to occur? And more broadly, are we seeing something? Are we seeing counterterrorism efforts and security efforts being undertaken in the right way, right? If the government says that drones are a threat, and they're saying that drones are a threat based on these TFRs, if they are saying that drones are a threat, are they taking any measures, effective measures, to counter that threat? If not, how does that change your own risk assessment, right? Again, we all know the whole phrase, or it's been kind of popularized over the past few years of, no one is coming to save you, right? Well, we say that kind of as a little bit more of a pessimistic view a lot of times, but generally speaking, more specifically even, you can say, is the response that is going to occur actually going to achieve the desired effect? Meaning, if the government's trying to prevent a drone attack on an electrical substation, can they do that? And when they respond to that, is it going to help anything at all? Essentially, is anyone coming to help? And if not, what can you do about it from your end, right? So how does that affect your preparedness, right? To kind of take up for those deficiencies that we may see. So again, all of this comes down to what I have here at the bottom, personal readiness, right? With regards to specifically those of you living in New York, New Jersey, Long Island, whatever, and if the threat or if the concern is a drone attack on an electrical substation, again, this is not my logic. This is the FAA's logic, and this is the state of New York. So they are saying, and they are concerned with drone attacks on electrical substations. This is not, again, my theory. This is theirs. So if that is the threat, how can you mitigate what possibly would happen if an attack were to occur, right? So say their counterterrorism efforts fail, say those TFRs fail, say an attacker is able to attack an electrical substation and the government can't stop that. Well, what's going to happen? Like, work through it in your own mind. What is going to happen? First of all, the power is going to go out. So do you have backup electrical needs? Do you have some sort of backup battery system or some kind of generator system? I'm not sure how the regulations work in the tri-state area with regards to that sort of thing, but I can tell you that it's probably not a good idea to run a gasoline generator in an apartment building. So do you have some kind of portable power station or backup in that regard? Same thing with regards to medical. If an insurgent is going to attack an electrical substation with, drones that have explosives on them, then chances are there are probably going to be some injuries, They also may miss the substation and hit you. So again, having medical readiness is very, very important. Having the knowledge and the skills and the equipment on hand is going to be very, very, very important. I don't like it any more than anybody else, having to sort of EDC a full IFAC every day, that I leave my house, or even just when I'm walking around my yard, honestly. I don't like that. I really don't like having to be this prepared, but unfortunately, that is a risk mitigation effort that is very, very important, I personally think. So, having some sort of medical equipment on you at all times, and the knowledge to use it, is critical in 2024 in the United States of America. Again, something along the same lines as fire. Fire, for me, at least personally, is a very, very big concern because fire can spread very, very quickly, and if we're starting to inject terror attacks at some point, into American society, the potential for fire can be very, very, very serious, especially if you live in a high-rise building that, may be the victim of a drone attack or something like that. It is utterly amazing how many people in the United States do not have functioning smoke detectors, and the number of people who do not have at least several fire extinguishers in their own homes. This is a very huge thing to prepare for, and not a lot of people put that much effort or investment into it. These things don't cost that much money, but especially if you live in, say, a townhouse or some sort of other shared dwelling with somebody else, maybe an apartment building, a duplex or something like that, or even if you live in a freestanding like subdivision or something like that, but your houses are so close together they might as well be an apartment building. That's kind of the trend throughout a huge portion of America, putting freestanding houses, but they're all very close together. So you may be very prepared when it comes to fire and things like that, but your neighbor might not be, right? So again, it's unfortunate to have to kind of prepare for other people, but that's been the culture of fire prevention for the past few hundred years, right? That's how this has worked. So again, when it comes to preparing for other people, having fire extinguishers, fire plans, and things like that for others is a worthy investment, even though that mentality may not come over to other forms of preparedness. With regards to fire, I personally think it is. I would very much rather buy, my next door neighbor a fire extinguisher and just give it to him for free than for my own house to burn down because they were not prepared. Now, again, situations are going to vary on that, or I'm not saying that everybody should go out and do that, but I'm saying to just kind of think about it. You may be prepared, but your neighbors might not be. And again, if the federal government is trying to tell us that drones with explosives may be flying into electrical substations, now this may start to become a little bit more higher priority in terms of preparedness, right? Same thing with regards to communications. Again, when electricity goes down, guess what also goes down? A lot of times cellular networks go down, your ham radio repeaters go down, other critical infrastructure goes down. Electricity is needed for most of society to function on a day-to-day basis. So when electricity goes out, when the power goes out, chances are communications will be very, very hard to come by. Now, again, when it comes to our modern world, we have a lot of ways to mitigate this. Again, Starlink, for instance, can be run off of a portable power station for many, many hours. It doesn't pull that much power. And that's satellite-based, non-terrestrial-based communications networks. That's very good, right? That's awesome to see. Same thing with regards to radio, right? I've talked about this at great length in other content before. Radios, you just can't beat having a small, low-cost radio, especially if you need to communicate with other people in your local area when the power goes out. So again, having the plan in place is more important than the specific gear you choose. The plan is always going to be more important, right? So again, having a lost contact plan, if you find yourself, without power and you can't contact, your loved ones or whatever, say if they're at work or if they're at school or something like that, having the ability or having the plan in place to know what they are going to do and what you are going to do in the event that the power goes out and it stays out for some time, that's very, very important. And it doesn't necessarily have to equate to buying more stuff, really, just having the plan in place for if the power goes out and if the cell phone towers go down for a little bit. That's very, very important. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. I hope that this has been somewhat helpful for many of you out there who have been kind of concerned about these sorts of drone things, and now that electrical substations are on the menu, and we're starting to see TFRs pop up. It's not exactly a good sign, but rather than kind of dwell on that and kind of get dragged down with that sort of thing, having the ability to take that information and then do something about it, a little bit more proactive. To be honest, the average American citizen out there can't really do that much with regards to counterterrorism, right? Unfortunately, that's just the way that it is. The average American citizen can absolutely punch above their weight in terms of assessing risk, though. And the American citizen out there doesn't have the bloat and slow reaction time that, say, a federal agency might. So again, once the federal government has done what they're going to do, the American people, which are somewhat separated from that, well, we can hold up our end of the bargain too, right? And be a little bit more proactive, even though a lot of the responsibilities that we're having to prepare for nowadays are unfortunately something that the government should be doing, right? It's the government's job to protect their citizens. And if that's not happening, well, it's unfortunate that that's happening, but we have to pick up the slack, right? So being a little bit more proactive, being a little bit more prepared, thinking about things a little bit more deliberately, these are the things that we can do in the meantime. So wrapping things up today with GhostNet Reports, I've gotten quite a bit of reports over the past week. I think a lot of people are taking some time off for the holidays and using that time to hop on the radio and talk about things, which is great. Propagation has been really good over the past couple of weeks. So again, we have a lot of reports talking about things like the U.S. Merchant Marine Fleet, which is fascinating information. And of course, we have someone here mentioning the FAA TFRs throughout the region in the northeast of the United States. So that's interesting information. Good to see, right? Again, lots of good news reports. The GhostNet is kind of an interesting way to get a lot of news reports you may not have seen, and it's a way to share information and standardize and normalize sharing information over the radio without going through the internet a lot of times, right? So it's got a very, very unique use case in that regard. But again, like I try to remind everyone a lot of times, right, you will get out of the GhostNet what you put into it. Now, again, a lot of people can passively listen to this sort of radio network, right, and get the news reports themselves. But again, if this is not just a single point of failure, right? This is not just a place for me to write reports and then push them out via radio. That's not what this is all about. That does happen. I do that quite a lot. But really, it's about a decentralized way of sharing information. So that's kind of the way that this works. Unfortunately, there are some downsides. Like this week, I got a fairly long complaint regarding some of the practices that happen on the GhostNet, which is one of the things that is kind of annoying is people doing SNR requests and kind of clogging up the network. I'll just say it that way, clogging up the radio net. I have addressed this in the guide itself, the manual for how to use this network. I've addressed it in video content. I've addressed it in social media posts. I can't address it, right, any more than I already have. This is just something that happens, right? And it's one of those things that happens when you have truly free speech, right? Truly free speech, or as close to it as you can get, has downsides sometimes, right? And sometimes people shout louder than other people. So that's one of the things that happens. And again, being able to work through these downsides, work around the inconvenient kinds of things, this is super important to be able to learn how to do now. If you get annoyed at a user hitting a button on the radio, how are you going to operate when the military is jamming you? Like, for instance, the Cuban military jamming, the radio frequencies like they did a few weeks ago. The Russians, the Ukrainians, whoever, the Chinese jamming, or even the Americans testing some kind of new radar. This happens all the time. So if you get annoyed and you find that, it's largely unusable, if you find that to be a problem, well, what's the solution, right? Can we work around this? Like, learn how to operate around this sort of thing. And learn how to use the tools that we have in a contested environment, right? In a non-permissive environment sort of thing. So again, just kind of an important reminder out there for a lot of people. I think that it's kind of an important thing to remember a lot of times. So that's pretty much all I have for today. Again, here are the sources. Again, thank you all for tuning in this week. I know that it's been kind of a hectic week, and I know a lot of people are kind of very much annoyed and kind of overwhelmed and just don't really care anymore about the whole drone situation in New Jersey. But that's why I wanted to take this week as a chance to kind of start using this situation as a way to think about other threats that may come up, right? So again, we live in very, very interesting times, and it doesn't mean that we need to panic, every minute of the day about this sort of thing. But also, we don't want to, keep our heads in the sand with regards to some of the more, malign actors out there for sure. There's plenty of people out there that are not super great, and they want to cause a lot of problems. So recognizing that, not dwelling on it so much, but recognizing it and taking steps to kind of work through it is very, very important, at least in my opinion. So again, thank you all for watching. Brief admin announcement. I'm going to take Christmas Day and the 26th off from producing wire reports. I'll produce them up until Christmas Eve like usual, but I want to take Christmas Day and the 26th off from doing some wire reports for a bit. But I'll return on the 27th. Of course, pending any emergency, if there's any kind of crisis or some sort of disaster that occurs, I will of course resume with a topical update on that as needed. But you guys know how it goes. So if you don't see a wire report on the 25th to the 26th, I'll be back on the 27th. So I'll again push this out as a reminder in Monday's wire, just for those people who haven't watched this far. So yeah, thank you guys all for watching, and I hope all of you have a very Merry Christmas in advance. And I guess we'll see you next week. So thank you guys all for watching again, and we'll see you next time. And as always, fight in the shade.